One of my favorite short stories, I read it when I was in high school, and it has stuck with me ever since, was a short story by Nathaniel Hawthorne, one of America's greatest authors. And it's a short story entitled Young Goodman Brown. Young Goodman Brown has all of this mystery and spiritual intrigue wrapped up into this short story. Young Goodman Brown's character, he leaves his wife, who, by the way, is named Faith, and he goes for an errand through the forest. And as he's walking through the forest, he encounters this dark figure, cloaked. He can't really make out a lot of details about the individual, but the person in the cloak alters his path in order to start walking with young Goodman Brown. And so they start to chat as they walk the road together. As time goes on and the conversation progresses, the conversation seems to turn darker and darker. Young Goodman Brown starts to have some really bad feelings about this person who's walking with him. And he finds the dark figure more and more unsettling. And strangely, as they're walking, they encounter a lot of townspeople who are also traveling. And as Brown hears, this man talking, they're having this conversation, this man's starting to frighten him. All of a sudden, he hears this terrifying sound. It is the sound of his wife, Faith, screaming for help out in the middle of the forest. And so he starts running to help her. And he starts running to where she's screaming from. And eventually, he finds it out in the clearing. There's this light shining out in the forest. The forest is dark by this time. And he bursts out into this clearing, and he encounters a witch's Sabbath. The whole town is there. Finally, it makes sense. While these townspeople were walking back and forth on the pathway, they were all going to this meeting, and they are about to sacrifice his wife, Faith. And so in desperation, Brown cries out to his wife, Faith, to resist, and he cries out to heaven for some help. And immediately, he wakes up in his bed. He's back at home. But the problem with it all is he's unsure as to whether or not this actually happened. He doesn't know if it was a dream. As for all of his awareness, it was absolutely a real experience that he had had. And so the story is a little bit tragic because he loses faith in his wife. He loses faith in the townspeople. And the story is quite dark itself. And here's how the story ends. It says, when he had lived long and was taken unto his grave, they carved no hopeful verse upon his tombstone, for his dying hour was gloom. That's a tragic story, and it's really Hawthorne's way of talking about the struggle of faith. I think about that, and I think about our own struggle of faith, and about how our own minds are so very often clouded, and we don't know what's right or wrong and up and down. And I think of that great verse from Paul in 2 Corinthians 4:4, where it says, in their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. You can see the steps of evil throughout history. Man invents the printing press. This is great because now we can write and distribute out print Bibles and distribute them, but man uses them for all kinds of lewd and evil purposes. Human beings develop the power of flight, believe it or not, and we use that, we think, to travel the world and to take the gospel. We also use it to hurt people and war against people and drop bombs on people. We develop the computer, and we think this is the age of information, and now we can, preserve knowledge from the past and distribute knowledge of the present, in just the touch of a button. And we use that to communicate more than anything else on the internet and through computers, things that are just lascivious and evil. And you just think about all of the things, the ways that we have of communication and the internet, television, all of that. And you think back to that verse, 2 Corinthians 4:4, whatever human beings do to advance the cause of the gospel, there's always a force of evil there to turn it against us. And the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers. And I don't want us to have lives that are lived like young Goodman Brown with no sense of hope and with no sense of assurance. Because right after Paul writes about the God of this world blinding the minds of unbelievers, he also writes this in verses 5 and 6. He says, because there is a God, the same God who said, "Let there be light," has also shone a light into our own hearts. And that light is the reflection of the face of God's glory, the face of Jesus Christ himself. And so I want us to be very sure that when all seems lost and when all seems unsure, there is one foundation that cannot be shaken, and that is the foundation of the light that is shown into our hearts, the glory of God's gospel as it is seen in the face of Jesus Christ. In Jesus' name, his love is burning in our hearts like living flame.